Hello class, welcome to the lecture on how to prepare informative speeches. Just a quick overview, there are several different types of informative. We have speeches on objects, events, process, concepts, and people. Now, concept speeches are considered the most difficult because they're speeches about ideas. For example, informing them about the principles of Confucianism or the principles of communication. A process speech is referred to as a demonstration speech. So, in other words, how to do something, how to bake a cake, how to perform CPR. It's really about a how to or a step by step process. With a speech about a person, you could talk about anyone as long as they have significance. So, talking about an Uncle Harry is not really a good idea. But let's say that you wanted to talk about Sojourner Truth, or it could be someone contemporary, LeBron James. Now, remember that you should be very focused when you're talking about a person. Please do not try to elaborate on every aspect of that person. Just go for the main idea. What is it that you want to demonstrate? Is it how LeBron's journey to his first championship began? What exactly do you want to highlight? Remember, you only have 5 to 7 minutes for this presentation, so you really want to be narrow. A speech about an event could be a past event, could be something that's coming up. Let's say that you want to inform the audience about the Ultra Music Festival. Again, you want to make sure that your purpose is narrow. You could also talk about an object. So, in other words, let's say that you're telling us about the turntable, the DJ turntable, and you're telling us the different parts. So, the long and short of it is that you can educate your audience about anything, just as long as it's relevant to your listeners. Do not try to persuade your audience. In this speech, you're just considering your listeners as learners. So, first of all, you're going to choose your topic. Brainstorming is a great way to do this. Then you're going to highlight your purpose. And of course, you know your purpose must be narrow and you know that it's to inform. You're going to organize your ideas, support them, choose the right visual, and that pretty much will wrap up the speech. So let's explore these in more detail. So first of all, when you're selecting a topic, I recommend choosing a topic that you know. It's a lot easier to talk about something you know as opposed to something that you have to research from scratch. Even though it's ambitious to try to learn a whole new topic, you're giving yourself a little bit more work. So if you want to take on that challenge, that's okay. The other thing is you want to choose a topic that you are passionate about. In other words, you really be excited about the topic because it helps in your delivery. And also choose a topic relevant to your audience. Consider what the listener knows. If it's something that they already know, chances are you may want to put a new twist on the topic. And again, this must be supported by research. So let's say that you want to inform the audience that cow's milk is harmful. Be careful how you're presenting that topic because it could be persuasive. So again, when you are delivering your presentation, you want to be as neutral as possible, as objective as possible, and so you're going to use research to support that. And for those of you who are not sure how to select topics, what I recommend is a tool called brainstorming. What you're essentially doing is to write down as many ideas as possible without even thinking about it. One way to do this is to write the letters of the alphabet in the left-hand column, A through Z. So you're going to take up 26 lines going down the page, and then next to each letter, try to come up with as many words that begin with that letter. For example, for A, I'm thinking of apple, Africa, and so on. For B, books, baby, boy, Bolivia. And you keep doing that all the way through to Z. And before you know it, you are going to have so many topics to choose from. So again, once you've generated these many topics, look to the criteria. Make sure that whatever topic you're choosing is something that you know you're excited about and that is relevant to the audience. And here's how you know if it's relevant to the audience. Conduct some audience analysis. You can do this by observing. So just looking around the class, seeing what's the demographics like. What is the age group? We know that the audience are adults. And even if you're a dual enrollment student, you have a certain level of maturity to be able to juggle both high school and college. So already we can determine some things just by observing. Sex. Is the audience primarily male or female? Why is that important? Well, you want to make sure that you are giving the right topic. For example, if you are talking to primarily guys, you may want to talk about things that interest them. And typically things like cars or tools, things like that pertain to guys. But I have to caution you against stereotyping. Sometimes girls like cars too. So it's worthwhile to go an extra step beyond observation. And you can give out a questionnaire. So this is another way to have information about the audience. Whether by doing a survey or you can even interview the audience. So it's going to be impossible to interview every single person, but choose segments of the population. For example, let's say that you choose about 5 people out of the 20 audience members that you have. So that's one way. Another way, let's say that you are invited somewhere to speak about a certain issue. Ask that person who invited you to speak, what is the makeup of the audience? Ask them some questions so that when you go to prepare the speech, you're orienting it towards that particular audience. Why would you consider things like race or ethnicity, religion? The same thing applies. You want to make sure that you are tailoring it to their needs. So something like the language that you use. For example, in my home country, Jamaica, when we talk about the bonnet, growing up, that was always referred to as the hood of a car. So even the words that you use, it's going to take on a different meaning based on the cultural context. Socioeconomic status. What's their status like in terms of wealth? If they're barely making it from paycheck to paycheck, now is not the best time to tell them how to invest in stocks. Pretty expensive stocks especially. So it goes on and on. Sexual orientation. Be careful that you're not excluding some members of the population by referring to the audience as man and wife, for example. Maybe they don't have a wife. So spouse or partner is a better word to use. So again, I've listed several aspects of demographic. Please keep those in mind. Psychological has to do with only 3 things. We have beliefs, attitudes, and values. Belief is what you consider to be true or false. For example, at one time the earth was believed to be flat. We know that's not the case now. Attitude is how you feel about something. And value is a deeply embedded belief, something that is the most difficult to change. Attitude is the easiest to change, believe it or not. So today you go to the mall, you see the shirt, you like it. By the time you come home, you hate it. That's the attitude, how you feel about it. Situational. This is the context. So we're talking about the time and place of communication. Assess, is it outdoors? What adaptations are you going to make? Or is it in a semicircle? How are you going to adapt your delivery? So all of these things come into play when we look at the audience. So very, very important part of the speech making process. In this class, you are not going to be required to conduct the audience analysis, but I assure you, if you have a speaking engagement in the real world, it's really worth your investment. So many things can go wrong if you are not targeting the right audience, and they'll feel like they're wasting their time. So please don't do that to them. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the different ways to organize your presentation. Now you can do it in terms of a time sequence. So let's say that you're talking about the telephone, how it has evolved. At one time, it was unthought of that we would be able to do so many things on our cell phones, including watching TV, having FaceTime, and all these dynamic things. And that's just the very beginning. So we can talk about where it all began and where we are now, or you can start with the present and then work your way back. In terms of a spatial pattern, you're looking at the physical space. So in other words, you are moving your audience from one point to another. If you are telling the audience how to maximize their trip at the Magic Kingdom, Disney's Magic Kingdom, you can say, okay, first you want to stop at this. I don't remember all the different theme parks and the rides, but let's say Tomorrowland is where you start, and then you end up in Mickey Mouse Club or whatever, and then you may work your way to X spot and so on. So that's the spatial pattern. You're moving your audience through a physical location. Let's say that you want to tell the audience how to purchase a car. You could also, or what to look for when purchasing a car. You could also use the spatial pattern. First, you want to look for these things on the outside, and then as you look closer into the interior, look for this and that. When you look at the engine, you want to look at that. So again, moving the audience through a physical space. Causal pattern is exactly what it sounds like. You're looking at a cause and effect relationship. You can see as a result of low income, the effect is more crime. Or you can begin with the effect and then describe the causes. Or sometimes this can be persuasive. So if you find that the issue that you are addressing is debatable, then you may want to save that for the persuasive speech. And last but not least, we have the topical pattern, which addresses things by topics. Now, basically, if you're not using the chronological, the spatial, or the causal, you are by default using the topical. So let's say that you want to talk about the different types of stress, and then you list the different types. That would be topical. If you want to talk about what causes stress, that would be causal. So as long the bottom line is that your speech should flow in a way that makes sense to both you and your listeners, and these are the patterns that are typical for the informative. Now, after you've generated your points, you want to use the appropriate supporting materials. And these are the most common types. First, we have examples. There's the brief example, which is a short example. You should eat lots of fruits like apple, oranges, grapes. Then we also have the extended example, which is more like a story. Now, the extended could be hypothetical, which means it didn't really happen, or it could be factual. I'm going to use the example of a persuasive speech to illustrate the extended. Let's say that you had a brother, and that brother passed away in an accident. And so you are advocating for not drinking and driving because it was a drunk driver who killed your brother. That would be factual. Let's say that you want to use the hypothetical example. This is where you let the audience imagine. So imagine driving home at 2 in the morning, and out of nowhere someone crashes into your car, and now you're paralyzed for life. So it didn't really happen, but it's still impactful because you're letting the audience imagine what if it did. Testimony. This is really what people are saying about the subject. We have lay testimony from ordinary individuals. We have the expert, and then we also have celebrity. Now, the names are self-explanatory. Let's use an example. If you wanted to know what was wrong with your car, and you asked your neighbor who had no particular expertise, then that would be lay. If you ask a mechanic, that would be expert. And if you so happen to stumble across a celebrity, whoever that may be, that would be celebrity testimony. Now, of course, most people don't get to run into celebrities every day, but we all know what they think about certain issues because we've been listening to them, whether it's through a Facebook, you know what I mean, the Twitter and so on. So the point is that they have opinions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those opinions are correct. So when you are citing sources, please use the expert. And we know that celebrities are influential, and that's why they are used in commercials. I'm sure that you can think of so many. Who comes to mind for me is Michael Jordan with the Hanes and so on. And of course, there are tons of others. But again, for your speech, avoid using celebrity and use the expert. Lay testimony is really beneficial if that person has first-hand account. So let's say, for example, they are a witness to a certain crime. Then, of course, we want to know what they have to say. Statistics. These are numbers that shows relationships between ideas. When using statistics, very, very important to round your numbers. Make it easy for the audience to understand. So instead of saying it is 56.875, round it to almost 57%, or you could even say almost 60. In terms of comparison, you're comparing the unfamiliar to something familiar. So let's say that something is about 100 yards long. You could say that that's similar to a football field. So visually, the audience can picture the size of the football field and can relate. Use a visual, and if this is necessary, in other words, if you're using tons of statistics, it's worthwhile to use a bar graph, a pie chart, depending on what your objective is. If you're trying to compare the piece in proportion to the whole, then a pie chart would work great. If you're looking at trends over a period of time, then a line graph or a bar graph would work fantastic. So let's say that you're telling the audience about the price of homes, how they've increased or decreased over the years, then it's a very good idea to use a graph. Analogy. This is where this is where you're comparing two things. So we have both a literal and a figurative analogy. With a figurative analogy, at first it looks like the two has nothing in common, but when examined more closely, we see where there are some common traits. So if you are talking to farmers about how caring for your skin, you can use an analogy to convey the importance of skincare. Just like the hedge around your garden protects your plants, likewise your skin protects your body. Just like you need to moisturize your, water your plants, likewise you need to moisturize your body, and so on. So the analogy can really drive home that point while creating common ground with your listeners. The last thing I want to talk about is using visual aids. Now, there's so many types of visuals, and I have most of them listed here. You have graphs, objects, yourself or others, video, charts, models, PowerPoint drawings, pictures, handouts. This is, of course, just some of them. I tried to list as many as possible. Now, regardless of whatever visual you're using, you want to make sure a couple of things. Number one, make sure that it can be seen easily. Sometimes students make beautiful poster boards. I don't have that up there, but that's also another visual. But the audience is not able to see anything because the font is so small. So whatever visual you use, make sure that even those in the back row will be able to see it. And make sure that the contrast is very clear. Sometimes the contrast is not really working for that particular speech. So a yellow on white is not a good idea. Make sure that it's very sharp. Make sure it's clear. Next, you want to make sure that you're talking to the audience and not the visual. In other words, don't turn your back to the audience while trying to explain the visual. I see that quite a lot, especially when students are using PowerPoint. Always make sure you are facing the audience. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't have so many words on the slide that you are reading from it word for word. Try to have very few words per slide. So really, no more than 6 words per line, no more than 6 lines per slide, and you don't want to go more than 6 slides without some kind of visual stimulating things like pictures. You could even have pictures on every slide. That's beautiful. And you don't even have to have words either. If you want to have only pictures, that's great. Remember that the purpose of the visual aid is to aid in comprehension and memory. So in other words, you want the audience to be able to understand the information better after integrating the visual. The other thing, always have a backup plan. So if you are using a Mac computer, make sure that you're saving it properly so that you can open it. And it's also recommended that you choose another kind of visual just in case it won't open, because the last thing I would want is for your presentation to be late because your visual won't work. If you are using PowerPoint or other electronic kinds of visual, email it to yourself as well, or use Google Docs or SkyDrive. Make sure that you have a backup plan. So in addition to your hardware, just make sure that there are other ways to access your visual. And remember that the visual should be in proportion to the speech. This is typically the case with videos. You know that the speech should be minimum of 5 minutes. Let's say that your speech is really 3 minutes. Do not show a 2-minute video and say that that's going to make up the time. What you're really doing is creating an imbalance in the speech. So your video should really be no longer than 30-40 seconds depending on the length of your presentation. So if it's closer to the 7-minute mark, you may even get away with a 1-minute video. But please don't try to stretch the speech using a video just because you couldn't come up with enough content. And I'm only saying this because I've seen it happen. Avoid talking over your video or audio. So either pause the video and then explain, or explain and then show the video, or you can mute it. If whatever is being said is not really relevant, sometimes they have music in the background, you can mute it, and then while it is playing, you explain what the video is about. And remember to integrate your visual aid before your conclusion. You remember your closing statement is always the last thing. So your summary and closing remark should be after you've integrated your video. And I'm also going to try to email you a YouTube link where a visual aid is integrated well. And it's also an example of a well done informative speech. So you can use that as a guide. So the bottom line is that your visual aid should enhance the presentation, not dominate it, not take away from it. It should not be distracting, and it should help to accomplish the objective. So hopefully this has been useful to you. The last thing I'm going to go over is the outline. In other words, putting everything together. As you know already, you must have a purpose statement. Because you've already learned how to do the informative, the self-introduction speech, you've in some sense mastered how to do the informative. The main difference between the self-introduction and the informative is that the self-intro talks about you. The informative talks about anything else that you think it's worthwhile to learn or to be informed about. So in this example, I'm informing the audience how to bake a vanilla cake. So remember, we start out with the purpose. Next, we want to go directly to the body to start generating those main points. So think about what are the steps in making that vanilla cake. First, you want to prepare the workstation. And then you are going to create subdivisions. Preheating the oven, getting the utensils, the ingredients, and greasing the pan. Excuse me. And so by doing that, you've completed the first step. Next, what's the second step? Preparing the batter. And so you will talk about the mixing the dry ingredients and then the wet ingredients. And then the third step is baking time. So it tells you what you need to do. Pour the batter in the pan. If it's relevant, tell them where to put it on the middle rack. If it's not relevant, then don't worry about including it. Set the timer. Excuse me. So for those of you who are bakers, you may find that you have a much better recipe than I have here. But the point is that I want you to know how to put it together. For your transition, again, you're connecting your main points together. So the only thing we have to do now is to work on our introduction and our conclusion. And one thing that's new here in your intro is your credibility statement, which tells the audience why you are an expert. So this was not needed for your Spirit First speech because you are the expert on yourself, so to speak. But when you're talking about other topics, you want to at least let the audience know why you're competent enough to speak about this area. You can refer to either your experience or through research that you've done. And for your conclusion, you're simply restating your main points, and then you're ending with a powerful close. So hopefully that has been very, very helpful. If not, feel free to email me. I'll be very happy to clarify. And I'll see you in class. Take care.